I've called someone better than you. The sentence didn't just slice the air. It detonated. Outside, Seattle rain hammered the 42nd floor glass of Langford Nexus like a drumline with a grudge. Inside the executive suite, Aurora Langford stared at quarterly reports that read like a slow-motion car crash. 31 years old, youngest woman to helm a Fortune 500 in a decade, in the face of a $12 billion empire spanning real estate, smart grid tech, and renewables. Yet the victory wreath had long since tightened into a noose. Her blonde hair was scraped into a severe knot, blue eyes rimmed with sleepless red. The graphite wool of her suit felt like armor and a cage at the same time. "The Meridian East timeline," said a calm voice from her doorway, "and a condensed brief on today's environmental review. I moved your 3 o'clock to the main conference room so facilities can fix the flicker in here." Aurora didn't look up. "Thank you, Micah." Micah Cole, executive assistant, 29, dark-eyed, steady-voiced, the man who could untangle her calendar with one hand while diffusing a board member with the other, stepped in, tablet in one hand, a slim folder in the other. He had the ease of someone who wore competence like skin. Not loud competence, never that. The quiet kind that drew a room's gravity without asking. "For what it's worth," he added, "I've audited the soil assays on Meridian East. There are discrepancies that—" "Not now," Aurora snapped, the two words cracking like ice. "I have actual problems to solve, not administrative footnotes." Micah's expression didn't change. He simply absorbed the blow the way granite absorbs weather, uncomplaining, unbothered, untouched at the surface by the storm above it. "Would you like me to push your 4 p.m. with investors?" Her phone vibrated across the desk. Conrad Vale. She put it on speaker, bracing herself. "Aurora," came Conrad's voice, dry as a legal document and twice as unforgiving. "I've reviewed Meridian East. This is a disaster." "We had supply chain shocks," she began. "Unseasonal rain took the south parcels offline. And if you can't turn this around in 2 weeks," Conrad said, unblinking even when she couldn't see him, "the board will have to consider replacement. I'm sending Victor Kane to oversee the project personally." The line died. The silence after was so complete she could hear the rain catch its breath. Victor Kane, the fixer of fixers, a rival developer who rescued projects by strip mining them for salvageable value and walking away with the deed. If he was coming, the board had already dug the grave. "Ma'am?" Micah asked softly. "All right in there?" She looked up at him, at the man who had anticipated her needs for 18 months, the one who made her schedule look like elegance and her chaos look like orchestration, the one she had never, not once, credited beyond the title on his badge. She saw him and didn't see him at all. "I've called someone better than you," Aurora said, hatred for her own fear making the words harsh. "Victor will be here tomorrow to take over Meridian East." The words hung a beat too long, a neon sign of dismissal. Micah didn't flinch. He smiled, not bitter, not defeated. A small, private curve like a person finding a bookmark exactly where they left it. "Of course," he said. "I'll make sure Mr. Kane has everything he needs." He turned to leave. For a heartbeat, Aurora saw something flicker across his face. Disappointment, yes, but something else too. Anticipation. The moment passed. The panic didn't. She turned back to spreadsheets where numbers bled out in neat black columns. Outside, Micah walked to his desk, logged into the console, and in a sequence of keystrokes changed the fate of a $12 billion company. Then he picked up his personal phone and called a number he hadn't dialed in a year. "Dante," he said when the line clicked. "It's time." "Time for what?" Dante Williams sounded half amused, half wary, the usual ratio when Micah announced anything. "To show Aurora Langford exactly who she just called useless." Across the bullpen, Lila Santos, Aurora's ruthlessly efficient chief of staff, one of the few people who understood that Micah's title fit him like a borrowed coat, watched him with knitted brows. "Everything okay?" she asked when he hung up. "Aurora's bringing in Victor Kane," Micah said mildly, tidying a stack of project briefs. "That shark? On Meridian?" Lila's voice went sharp. "He'll gut it until it looks profitable and leave the bones to us." Micah's mouth tipped. "Not if I can help it." "What does that mean?" "It means," and he said, That the person Aurora called useless has receipts. He didn't say the rest out loud. That Rivers and Cole Environmental had been the first firm on Meridian East 18 months ago, before a mysterious board directive terminated their contract and replaced them with an outfit that treated environmental science like a paint color you pick at the end. He didn't say that he'd taken an assistant job to map the Langford machine from the inside because strategy is a scalpel, not a hammer. He didn't say that Aurora reminded him of a steel wire, beautiful, tensile, dangerous, and often the first to cut itself. He just smiled that careful smile and kept moving. The next morning, Victor arrived like weather. His entourage colonized the conference room, rolling out charts and speaking in the clipped cadences of men whose shoes never touch mud. Victor himself shook Aurora's hand like he was already counting how much her ring could pawn for. "I've skimmed the files," he said, spreading floor plans like tarot cards. "It's worse than the rumor. You've got contaminated subgrade, bad stormwater modeling, and a procurement pipeline that's a clown car on fire." "How bad?" Aurora asked, throat dry. "400 million in overruns," Victor said with the kind of glee that isn't joy, just the thrill of being right in public. "Non-compliance on 3 fronts, and frankly, design decisions that shouldn't have left a classroom, let alone a drafting table. If you want to survive, we tear it down to footings, pull new studies, and redesign from scratch." "How long?" "6 months to reset, if the city doesn't suspend you first." Aurora felt the room tilt. 6 months was a death sentence dressed in a timeline. There has to be another path. "Actually," said a voice from the door, "there is." Every head turned. Micah stood there in a charcoal suit she realized she had never seen him wear in the office. It fit like a tailored argument. In his hands, a stack of binders so thick they ought to have had their own zip code. "This is a closed meeting," Victor said, not bothering to hide his sneer. "Assistants fetch coffee. They don't fetch cures." Micah stepped inside, unhurried, placed a binder in front of Victor, then Aurora, then the city representative who'd been staring at the rain like it owed him money. "The problems aren't with the soil," Micah said, tone easy, almost conversational. "They're with how the assays were interpreted and how the remediation was staged. The original studies modeled plume migration with a seasonal variable this replacement firm never accounted for. Your contamination is a seasonal false positive exacerbated by inadequate dewatering." Victor flipped a page. He stopped flipping. He started reading. "Where did you even get this?" Aurora asked. Her voice had lost its blade. It sounded like someone spotting the edge of land after a storm. "I requested it yesterday," Micah said. "Requested," Victor echoed, dry. "From whom?" "Rivers and Cole Environmental," Micah said. "They conducted the original analysis." Lila exhaled like a person who'd just remembered an address she thought she'd lost. "We had them on Meridian East until the contract was terminated." "On whose recommendation?" Aurora asked, even though some part of her already knew. She could feel the answer like a bruise she hadn't touched yet. Micah slid a termination letter onto the table. The signature at the bottom looked back at her like it always had. Long loops, shorter patience. "Conrad Vale," Aurora said. The syllables tasted like metal. Victor found his voice first. "Even if this analysis is accurate," he said, clinging to condescension like a flotation device, "there's no way an assistant understands the complexity of—" "I don't," Micah agreed lightly, "but the principal consultant who authored it does." "Where is he?" Victor demanded. Micah's smile arrived, quiet as snowfall and twice as certain. "Standing in front of you." Silence hit the table hard enough to shake the glasses. "Aurora," he said, and for the first time he said her name like he had permission to say it, like it belonged in the same sentence as his. "My name is Micah Cole, founding partner of Rivers and Cole Environmental. Lead on the original Meridian East environmental assessment. The person Conrad Vale dismissed when the data didn't bend to his preferred narrative." The rain beat its drum outside. No one in the room breathed. "That's impossible," Victor said, voice thin. "You've been organizing Outlook invites." "And watching," Micah said, unruffled. "Learning how this company breathes. Waiting to see if its leadership could tell the difference between packaging and substance." Aurora felt the heat flood her face and chest. A memory surfaced. Micah quietly adjusting an agenda so she could meet a community organizer before a zoning hearing. Micah adding a red flag icon to a consultant memo without comment. Micah always there, always a step ahead, always invisible, because she made him so. If your plan works, she said, her voice steadying, not with bravado, but with the precise calm of a surgeon about to cut, how fast can we implement? Remobilize remediation tomorrow, Micah said. Stage dewatering before the next weather swing. Resequence subgrade prep on parcels B through D. If you stop bleeding money on bad staging and get out of your own way, we can have foundations moving in 7 days. Victor laughed, the brittle sound of a glass that doesn't realize it's cracked. Impossible. Micah looked at him, not cruel, just patient. You keep using that word. You expect us to bet a $2 billion project on the word of a man who's been fetching coffee? No, Micah said. I expect you to bet on results. My firm has executed 7 projects with similar profiles in the last 3 years. Not one missed a major milestone. Not one paid a compliance penalty. Not one overran because of environmental staging. Meridian East can be the 8th, if leadership is courageous enough to admit it replaced excellence with expedience. Aurora glanced at the city representative from Planning and Natural Resources. He'd been quiet too long to be uninvested. If the original firm resumes oversight and the data holds, the rep said, fingers steepled, we can suspend enforcement while you correct course. But I'll need weekly reporting, independent spot checks, and full transparency. You'll have it, Micah said. We can even open a live dashboard. Dante's already standing up the portal. Dante, Aurora asked. Dante Williams, Micah said. My partner, Harvard roommate. The person who'll call you in an hour with your dashboard credentials. Victor's mouth tightened. If you're who you say you are, why the charade? Why take an assistant role at all? Because when you consult from the outside, Micah said, you only see the machine. When you sit at its heart, you feel the pulse. I wanted to know if Langford Nexus was a body worth operating on. And what's your diagnosis? Aurora asked. She kept her face composed, but she could feel her pulse in her throat. Strong vital signs, Micah said. Prognosis excellent, if the patient stops self-sabotaging. Victor gathered his papers. If Ms. Langford wants to roll the dice on a romance novel twist, that's her choice. My recommendation stands. Noted, Aurora said, and to her own surprise, she didn't sound like a woman drowning. She sounded like a woman building a raft while memorizing the current. She turned to Micah. You'll need an authorization letter to re-engage. Lila can... I'll draft it, Lila said, already moving. And I'll ping legal. Legal? Micah asked. Harper Joe, Aurora said. She doesn't suffer fools, which includes, for the record, me. A muscle in Micah's jaw relaxed. Approval or relief. She couldn't tell which. Good. We'll need a clean corridor to work. And we'll need you. Aurora blinked. Me? This fails if leadership signals panic, Micah said. It succeeds if leadership signals resolve. Everyone in this building watches your face before they look at the data. You steady, they steady. He held her gaze, and in it she saw something she hadn't let herself hope for in days. A future that didn't look like triage. Do it, she said. Show me. He nodded once. No flourish, no victory pose, just utility. He turned to go, then paused. One more thing, he said without turning back. Whatever Conrad told you about why our contract was terminated, you should know this. We were dismissed not because we were wrong, but because we were inconvenient. When the room emptied, the rain sounded softer. Aurora stood alone at the head of the table and tried to outstare her reflection in the glass. In it, she saw the CEO who had called someone better, the woman who had mistaken quiet for small, the leader who had almost let a rival swallow her company whole because fear wears such convincing suits. Her phone buzzed. Harper Joe. Heard you poke the bear. I'm en route. Another buzz. Unknown. Your Meridian dashboard is live. DW credentials sent to your email. P.S. Please tell your assistant he owes me tacos for making me code before breakfast. A third buzz. Conrad Vale. We need to discuss Victor's timeline. Call me. She didn't call Conrad. Not yet. She opened her email instead and found the dashboard link. The portal bloomed. Parcels rendered in color. Groundwater gradients mapped like topographic fingerprints. Gantt lines compressing as sequences shifted. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It looked like a heartbeat resuming. Holy, Lila whispered at her shoulder. Ha ha ha, who is this guy? Aurora almost laughed. The question was so laughably late. Someone better, she said. In the war room that used to be Conference C, Micah stood with Dante on speaker, a dozen engineers looped into a video grid, and a whiteboard blooming with the choreography of a rescue. He ditched the tie. He worked like a person who needed all the oxygen he could take in. For every problem he named, he diagrammed two exits. He deferred when someone else had the narrow expertise, then stitched their answers into a strategy that made sense to people who didn't speak in hydrology. Storm window in 4 days, Dante said. You've got a 72-hour lane to move mass if we want to hit reset before the city checks your homework. Copy, Micah said. Redline the sequence for parcel B. Aurora watched from the doorway for a moment, watched how people learned his rhythm and matched it, how even the skeptical site lead, who had grumbled about assistants playing engineer, was now jotting notes like his life depended on it. She stepped in. Ms. Langford, Micah said, this is our showrunner now. She lifted a brow. Showrunner? Some teams call it a PMO, he said, but that sounds like paperwork. This is theater. We have staging, we have choreography, and we have an opening night. She almost smiled. Almost. Tell me where you need me. Everywhere your shadow falls, he said. We'll own the dirt. You own the room. Harper Joe arrived with a legal pad and a stare that stripped paint. I've reviewed the termination trail, she said without preamble, dropping into a chair. Conrad the Magnificent left fingerprints. If he engineered a crisis to justify a takeover play, I can make him eat those emails like communion. Later, Micah said softly. Right now, we execute. Harper studied him for a beat, then nodded once. Do your ballet. I'll keep the wolves from chewing through the door. The next 48 hours were motion and will, the kind of motion that empties adrenaline from the body and fills it with something steadier. Aurora found herself doing the things Micah asked without arguing, because he didn't ask to show off. He asked because the asking mattered. She stood on muddy ground in boots that cost less than the coffee machine in her kitchen and listened to a foreman explain why a pump had to be re-sited by 12 feet, or they'd be moving dirty water in circles forever. She walked into procurement and told them, calmly and without apology, to reorder the world. At 2 in the morning, back in her office, she stared out at a city that glowed like a living circuit. The glow reflected in the glass, doubling her. The Aurora who had run on fear, and the one who had decided to change the script mid-performance. She rubbed her eyes and turned when the door eased open. Micah stood there with 2 paper cups and a small paper bag. You look like an alien who forgot their planet, he said, and held out a cup. Coffee, strategic. She accepted it. We have an HR form to file for that joke. I'll take my reprimand in pastry, he said, offering the bag. Also strategic. She broke in spite of herself, a small laugh she didn't authorize. When were you going to tell me? She asked quietly, fingers tight around the cup's warmth. Who you were. What you were. When I knew whether Langford Nexus could be a partner instead of a client, he said. When I knew whether its CEO could be a partner instead of a politician. She held his gaze. And your current hypothesis? Evolving, he said. And there it was again. That private smile, not arrogant, just certain of the path even when the destination moved. You think I'm a politician, she said. It wasn't really a question. I think you're a person who learned to survive a boardroom by armoring up, he said. Armor's good, until you need to feel where the machine is failing. They stood in the soft hum of the office, the scent of coffee and rain stitching a temporary truce around them. Why me? She asked before she could take the question back. Why this company? You could have consulted from the outside and left when Conrad pulled the plug. Why put yourself in my line of fire? Micah considered that, then leaned his shoulder against the doorframe. Because I watched you for 2 years from across the industry, he said, voice low and even. You built a company that didn't treat sustainability like a press release. You made enemies by telling the truth a little too early. I wanted to know if the rumor was real. What rumor? That underneath the armor, he said, you still listen. Lightning whitened the clouds over Elliott Bay. The thunder took its time to arrive. She didn't look away. Then listen to me now, she said. We fix Meridian East. We turn the board inside out if we have to. We set a new standard while we do it. And when Conrad calls, which he will, we take his threats and file them under obsolete. Micah's smile tilted. Yes, ma'am. Don't call me ma'am, she said out of reflex, and then softer. Don't call me useless either. Noted, he said. And for the record, you never were. Her phone buzzed again. Conrad Vale. On my way up. She glanced at Micah. He didn't sigh. He didn't flex. He simply set his empty cup on her desk and straightened. Let's give him a new show, he said. Conrad walked in without knocking, trailed by a junior counsel with an iPad and a face that looked like it hadn't slept since tax season. He scanned the room, clocked Micah, and dismissed him with a look calibrated for lesser men. Then he turned the full force of his boardroom baritone on Aurora. I told you to let Victor handle Meridian, he said. Instead, I find you entertaining theatrics. Victor recommended a 6-month reset we cannot afford, Aurora said. Rivers and coal? Conrad cut in, a tight smile slashing across his face. We terminated that contract for cause. For convenience, Harper Joe said from the couch, where she had materialized like a summoned fact. Your memo says convenience. The cause arrived later, when the replacement firm invented problems they were paid to solve. Conrad's eyes flicked to Harper. And you are? The person who keeps CEOs out of prison and boards out of the Wall Street Journal, Harper said pleasantly. Hi. Conrad ignored her. He stepped closer to Aurora, lowering his voice as if proximity could manufacture intimacy. You're young, Aurora, he said, the paternal tone so smooth it almost squeaked. This is bigger than you. Let Victor take the hit. Let the grown-ups... Conrad, Aurora said, and there was steel in it now, tempered and bright. Micah Cole is resuming environmental oversight. We're remobilizing remediation in the morning. The city is aligned. Legal is aligned. Procurement is aligned. If you want to help, tell Victor to stand down. If you want to watch, sit. Otherwise, don't stand in the doorway. You're blocking the view. Micah didn't look at her, but she could feel his approval like heat at her back. Conrad's smile went colder. You do realize, he said, that if this gambit fails, there won't be a Langford nexus left to lead. If we keep doing what you recommended, Aurora said, there won't be a Langford nexus left to save. Conrad turned to Micah as if noticing him for the first time as a category of threat. And you, he said, I know your kind. Preach purity, bill by the hour, and leave before the invoices hit accounts payable. Close, Micah said almost kindly. We tell the truth, bill by the outcome, and stay until the job is done. Conrad's jaw clicked. He pivoted, stalking out with a final parting shot tossed over his shoulder. You've got 2 weeks, and he said. If you fail, you won't get a second chance. The door closed. The rain hushed as if the city were leaning in. Aurora let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding since the first spreadsheet started bleeding. She turned to Micah. 2 weeks, she said. He nodded. Plenty. Micah, she said, and the name felt different now in her mouth. I owe you an apology. He shook his head. Save it for when we pour the first footer. She almost smiled again. Then let's earn it. They walked back to the war room together, shoulder to shoulder, not touching, needing neither speech nor ceremony to mark what had changed. On the wall, the plan unfurled like choreography. Outside the glass, the rain finally began to thin. And somewhere between a sneer and a storm window, the woman who had called someone better had found exactly that, only to discover he'd been standing in her doorway for 18 months, waiting for her to open it. By dawn, pumps were humming. By noon, staging was resequenced. By nightfall, Parcel B looked less like a catastrophe and more like a start. And in an executive suite that had felt like a tomb for weeks, Aurora Langford stood with coffee gone cold and eyes gone bright, watching a dashboard pulse green across the screen. In the reflection, Micah moved behind her, a steady presence, a quiet fulcrum. You're useless, she had said. He had smiled. Now she understood why. Daybreak arrived with engines. Pumps thudded in a low mechanical heartbeat, hoses trembled, and the site crews moved like a practiced ensemble that had finally been given the right sheet music. The ground inside Meridian East no longer looked like a battlefield of bad guesses. It looked like choreography in mud. Micah was already there when Aurora stepped out of the SUV in a hard hat and boots that would never make it to a board portrait. He stood at the edge of Parcel B, radio in one hand, the other pointing in clean arcs as he spoke to foremen who had learned, in less than 24 hours, that his calm did not mean softness, and his precision did not mean distance. He finished 3 sentences before he turned and found her. "Morning," he said. "We are 90 minutes ahead of the new sequence." Aurora glanced at the temporary command tent where Dante's dashboard glowed on 3 screens. The gaunt lines had shifted again, compressing, then stabilizing like a lung learning how to breathe after a long season of smoke. The weather overlay said 4 days to a frontal swing. The crew manifest showed full staffing. The procurement tracker flashed green against items that had been amber for weeks. "Show me the weak joints," she said. Micah pointed. "The northwest sump needs a larger catch basin, or we will be pushing yesterday's mistakes in a circle. The B2C transfer road can take light rigs, but not the loaded ones, so we phase the heavier moves overnight. And the north fence needs a new gate if we want the city inspector to walk without feeling we stage a theme park for him." "You are staging a theme park," a voice said behind them. It was Harper in side-issue boots and a jacket that looked like it had seen as many depositions as downpours. Only this time the ticket comes with a waiver. "I spoke to planning at 7. We get our first independent spot check at 2. Micah nodded. "Good. Nothing makes people honest like daylight." They moved as a small unit through the site, Aurora absorbing details with the kind of concentration that had built Langford Nexus in her 20s and nearly broken her in her 30s. She listened to the foreman who wanted the pump moved 12 feet and said yes without pretending to know better. She watched Micah listen to a junior engineer explain an unexpected flow pattern and saw the way his attention changed the engineer's posture from worried to proud. She spoke with a community liaison who had arrived with 2 neighborhood leaders and did not let her gaze drift toward her phone when they described how the last month had sounded like a factory trying to drown its own guilt. By mid-morning, the command tent thrummed. Dante's voice came in on the speaker, smooth and unflappable. "Weather model shifted by 3 hours. Your storm window opens sooner. If you want to get ahead of the inspector and stay there, we should depressurize the catchment before noon." "Do it," Micah said. "And I want the dewatering logs pushed to the live portal every 30 minutes. "Already scripted," Dante replied. "Also, your friend in legal sent me a list of the replacement firm's memos. You will want to see the timestamps." Harper held up a printout that looked like an accusation with staples. "They manipulated the seasonal variable after your termination." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "If you still wonder whether Conrad engineered a crisis to justify bringing Victor in, stop wondering." Aurora felt the hot prickle of anger along her jaw. Not the wild kind that blows apart the nearest fragile thing, the colder kind that knows where the load-bearing walls are. "We fix the site first," she said. "Then we pull the thread and see how much of his sweater comes off." A text buzzed her phone. "Conrad." The message was terse. "You will host a special board call at 4. Victor will present his findings." She turned the screen so Micah and Harper could read it. "He will try to box me in with the narrative he already crafted," she said. "I need a counter that is not theater, but cannot be ignored." Micah did not hesitate. "We show live telemetry to the board. We let the site speak for itself, and we invite the city inspector to give his first impressions on the call. If the inspector refuses, we invite the community liaisons to speak. Boards ignore charts. They do not ignore the public when the public is in the room." Harper's smile was small and bright. "Also, we share the termination letter and the manipulated variable memo with timestamps before Victor begins. You do not frame it as accusation. You frame it as transparency. If Conrad wants to argue with the clock, let him argue with the clock." Aurora exhaled. Her mind began to slot pieces into place, like scaffolding finding its angle. "Lila can manage call logistics. Dante can feed the examples. I will set expectations at the top and ask Victor to go last." You have to be careful, Harper said. If you humiliate him, you make an enemy who will burn every bridge on his way out. If you let him feel the room shift without naming him as the cause, he might leave before he realizes he was dismissed. Micah touched his radio. He had that listening face again, the one that made grown men with mud up to their shins straighten like cadets. I need 10 minutes on the East Rim, he told the air. Lila, can you meet me there with the revised staging map? Already walking, Lila answered from somewhere on site, her voice clipped and warm at once. They split. Aurora followed Micah along a plywood path that flexed and sighed under weight. The East Rim looked over parcels C and D, where backhoes moved like patient animals, and men in neon vests looked very small against a rectangle of ground that would one day hold housing and shops and children on scooters. She stood at the edge and felt the wind lift damp hair off her forehead. The city smelled like steel and wet earth and distant coffee. I was wrong yesterday, she said without looking at him. I called you useless because I was afraid. It is not an excuse. It is a diagnosis of a bad habit. He did not thank her. He did not say it was nothing. He let the words rest between them like an object placed on a table for both to inspect. Then he said softly, "You were not wrong about being afraid. You were only wrong about what to do with it." "What would you do with it?" she asked. "Turn it into fuel," he said. "Burn clean and hot and long." She turned to face him. "When you say we, who do you mean? Rivers and coal. Langford Nexus. You and me. The city. The site." "Yes," he said, and the word carried the weight of something chosen rather than assumed. Lila arrived at a jog, the revised staging map tucked under her arm. "We can reroute the heavy loads on a temporary laydown if procurement can get us the geogrid by morning," she said. "Also, small thing, the inspector is early. He is at the north gate." Harper came up on the radio. "I will meet him. Keep working. Do not swarm him. Let him walk where he wants." 10 minutes later, the inspector was moving through Parcel B with a clipboard and an expression that said he had seen every kind of performance and most of the shortcuts. He tested a log entry against a pump. He asked 3 questions that were simple and hard to lie to. He listened to the answers without doing the polite nod people do when they plan to ignore you. He stopped near the catch basin that had started the morning as a problem and now looked like the answer to an exam that had been graded unfairly. He glanced at Aurora. "You changed your staging overnight." "We corrected it," she said, "with the guidance of the original firm." He looked at Micah. The original firm was dismissed. "For convenience," Harper said, appearing at his shoulder like a person who always knew where the doorways were. And then the data was massaged to fit a plan that never fit the site. The inspector did not smile. He did not scowl. He made a note. He walked another circuit, and when he was done, he said, "I will write that the site is making corrective progress consistent with the original environmental model. Continue to publish logs and expect a follow-up tomorrow." "Thank you," Aurora said, and meant it not as flattery, but as supply. After he left the tent filled with the kind of relieved talking that happens when people have worked all morning with their shoulders around their ears. Dante's voice cut through again. "Your board call is in 2 hours. I have the live feed prepared, 3 key graphs, and a toggle that lets you show a before and after of the staging in under 10 seconds. We also found an internal message chain where the replacement firm mentions pleasing Conrad by declaring Parcel B a lost cause. It reads like a bad novel. Harper wants to decide whether to surface it now or keep it in her back pocket." "Keep it," Harper said. "We only show what we need to win daylight. The rest we hold in reserve until we choose the theater." Aurora nodded. She moved to the center of the tent and waited. The voices quieted. The crews shifted. The hum of the site did not stop, but it became a background pulse instead of a roar. She looked at the faces, smeared with work and hope and doubt held at bay. "I have failed you for the last month," she said, voice steady. "I will not dress it up. I chose speed over sense, and then I chose pride over help. I asked you to pretend the site was telling us one thing when it was shouting another. We have changed course. We will publish every log. We will correct every error. And when the board asks for theater, we will give them the truth and let it play itself." Nobody clapped. This was not a speech that wanted applause. It wanted work. People nodded and turned back to their tasks. That was better. The board call began with the inevitable, polite throat clearing that always precedes professional bloodshed. The faces tiled across Aurora's screen. Conrad, impassive and faintly amused. Three directors who used their expressions like poker chips. An independent who had spent a career in public service and looked exactly as interested in performance as the inspector had been. Victor, sharp and coiled. "Thank you for joining," Aurora said. "Before we begin, I am sharing the live Meridian dashboard so you can see the site as we speak." She clicked. The screen filled with telemetry and small camera windows that showed men and women moving through the choreography the board had not expected to witness. "This is premature," Victor began. "The proper sequence is to present findings, then show evidence." "We are going to invert the usual order," Aurora said, and she did not raise her voice. "We are going to start with the site speaking for itself." She introduced the inspector. He had agreed to join for 2 minutes. He spoke for 90 seconds, and in those 90 seconds, he changed the shape of the conversation more than any chart could have. "Corrective progress," he said, "consistent with original model, transparent logging, follow up tomorrow." "Thank you," Aurora said. She turned to Dante. "Please show the staging before and after." Dante toggled, a simple animation. Red bars grew thin and green ones grew thicker as the choreography corrected. No sound effects, no editorializing. Victor leaned in, eyes narrow. "This proves nothing about cost overruns." Harper raised a hand. Nobody had given her the floor. She took it anyway. "We will discuss cost overruns after we review the termination trail and the data manipulation that occurred after the original firm was dismissed." She pasted the letter and the memo into the chat. The timestamps lay there like a row of small bright teeth. Conrad did not flinch. He had not built a career by showing flinch in public. He said in a voice that suggested patience with a misbehaving subordinate, "This is an attempt to distract from leadership failure." "It is an attempt to remove the fog machine," Harper said. Aurora stepped in before the line sharpened further. "The project failed because we replaced excellence with expedience," she said. "It is succeeding because we reversed that decision." "Victor, you recommended a 6-month reset. We cannot afford it financially or ethically. We will not burn 6 months throwing good money after pride. We will recover within the weather window we have, and we will do it while meeting compliance." Victor spoke through his teeth. "If you are wrong, you will cost this company more than a reset ever would." "If we had kept your plan," she said, "we would have cost the city and our neighbors more than money. We would have cost faith. The board will have to decide which expense it prefers." The independent director leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Miss Langford, if the site continues to show this progress for the next 7 days, I will move that we ratify your corrective plan and retain Rivers and Cole. If it does not, I will move that we pause Meridian and accept the consequences. Between today and that motion, I will require daily reports." "You will have them," Aurora said. Victor made a small cutting gesture with his hand, the kind of movement men make when they are used to the room obeying the air. "I withdraw from this project," he said. "I do not put my name on illusions." "We respect your choice," Aurora said. Then she ended the call before anyone could turn their exit into a monologue. The tent was very quiet for a moment. Then the radios began to buzz again, small and vital. Work resumed. The afternoon bled toward evening, the sky bruised with color and threat. The weather model shifted again. Dante's voice returned, edged with real concern for the first time. "The front is speeding up. We have less slack than we thought. If the pumps hold and the lanes stay open, we are fine. If either fails, we lose the window." At 6, the north rim pump coughed and went still. An electrical breaker had tripped and then refused to reset. The sump began to rise in inches that felt like shouts. A backhoe stalled on the temporary lane and blocked the access road for the heavier rigs. Micah was at the pump before the silence had finished ringing. He crouched, shoulder pressed to the housing, listening like a doctor with a stethoscope. He did not yell. He did not look around for someone to be at fault. He turned to the electrician and said 3 sentences that authorized the right amount of risk and no more. He turned to the foreman and said 3 more that moved the stalled backhoe in a way that felt like inevitability rather than panic. Aurora stood at the edge of the sump and felt the old fear rise with the water. Then she turned it the way he had told her to turn it, and when she spoke into the radio, her voice was very clear. Procurement, I need the backup motor from the west laydown now. Logistics, open the south lane and send the light rigs through in sequence C, D, B. Lila, call the inspector and notify him of the failure and the corrective action we have initiated. Dante, timestamp this sequence and push it to the portal. No spin, just the truth. The electrician reset the breaker with a tool and a prayer. The motor stuttered, then caught. The pump thudded back to life, and the sump stopped rising. The stalled backhoe moved under its own will after a crew chief cajoled it like a difficult horse. The light rigs took the south lane, and the choreography resumed its beat. Micah stepped back, wiped rain from his jaw with the back of one hand, and looked at her. Not for approval, not for applause. For the next 10 seconds of decisions. She gave them. He executed, the sight steadied again. The storm arrived at midnight, not the cinematic kind that rips tarp lines and hurls plywood like cards. The heavy, disciplined kind that falls and dares you to be bored by your own vigilance. The crews rotated. The pumps kept time. The dashboard bars climbed and settled like breaths. At 3, they walked the perimeter together under hoods, boots sucking at forgiving mud. The city glowed beyond the fence line, a grid of excuses and intentions. Aurora's shoulders were tired in a way that had nothing to do with a chair or a spreadsheet. It felt like real fatigue. It felt earned. You never answered my question, she said as they stood near the east rim again. Why take my assistant job? Why not come in the front door with a proposal and a fee? Because proposals get filed, he said, and fees get debated. Positions get defended for the sake of defending them. But when you stand inside the machine and see how the belts slip and where the heat builds, you can put a finger in the exact place where the energy leaks and stop it. Most companies never let you get that close. Yours did, or you did, even when you did not know you were doing it. She nodded, rain at the edges of her eyelashes, the taste of metal in her mouth. Thank you for staying, she said. He said nothing to that, and the silence felt like acceptance, not refusal. By dawn, the dashboard showed a serene field of green that would have looked like science fiction 2 days ago. The inspector returned at 8. He walked the site with the same unflappable patience, and when he left, he said he would file an update that used the word exemplary with the necessary legal qualifiers around it. In the command tent, Harper stood with a stack of notes. She was smiling the careful smile of a person who knows exactly how much ammunition she has left. We will pursue the manipulations separately, she said. For now, we keep our heads down and our logs up. Conrad will not forget what happened on that call. Victor will try to salvage his pride. Let them. Pride is expensive. Proof is cheap once you have it. Aurora looked at Micah. He met her gaze without flinching. The minute you begin to glow with victory, he said, is the minute the site punishes you. We keep doing what works. Then when we have slack, we replant every place this project bruised. Replant, she echoed. The word felt like a plan and a promise. He nodded. And then we talk about what comes after Meridian East. He said it neutrally, as if asking about lunch. The future hung between them anyway, like scaffolding waiting for a floor. What comes after, she asked. That depends, he said, on whether you want a partner or a consultant, on whether Langford Nexus wants a heartbeat or a balance sheet, on whether you and I can keep working in a room without turning it into a stage when the work is what needs the applause. She did not answer, not because she did not have one, but because the pumps thudded again and men and women moved, and the site called them back like a duty and a home. The third morning felt like the moment just after a hard dive when your chest burns and air finally floods your lungs. The pumps kept their patient rhythm. The dashboard stayed steady. The inspector's update had landed in the city's system with words like corrective and consistent. The crews moved with that quiet confidence that only arrives when a plan stops being a poster and becomes muscle memory. At 9, a convoy of black cars slid to a stop at the curb outside Meridian East. Aurora watched from the command tent as doors opened and men in dry suits stepped into a wet world. Conrad was at the center of the cluster, like a knot pulled tight. Victor was not with him. 2 aides carried branded binders. A third carried the look of someone who had been told to keep secrets and had learned that secrets have a way of growing teeth. Lila came to stand beside Aurora. She had a tablet in one hand and rain on her collarbone. He will try to stage a visit and make your site look like a set, she said. He thinks cameras can do what data cannot. We will show him the same thing we showed the inspector, Aurora said. Nothing hidden, nothing wrapped. Harper appeared on the other side like punctuation. I have a folder for him, she said, patting her bag, and a second for his counsel if he brought any. We are done being polite about the facts. Conrad walked straight into the command tent. He did not ask permission. He did not offer greeting. He scanned the screens as if looking for an error he could turn into a verdict, and then he looked at Micah like a person considering a tool he did not buy, and therefore did not trust. Mr. Cole, he said, you have enjoyed your moment. It is time to return control of this project to leadership. Micah did not step back. He did not step forward. He kept the position he had because he had earned it. The site is in control of itself, he said calmly. We are obeying the data. Leadership is welcome to stand in the same weather. Conrad turned to Aurora. Your board expects a comprehensive report today. Victor prepared one before he exited. We will adopt it with minor edits and present it at 5. We will present a report at 5, Aurora said. It will not be Victor's. It will be the site's. Conrad took a small step, the kind of movement people make when they remember an old trick and want to see if it still works. He lowered his voice. Aurora, you are in over your head. Let me get you out of this without blood on your reputation. Harper set a folded letter on the table between them with quiet care. The letterhead caught the tent light. Langford Legal, termination for convenience. She placed a second page on top. A memo with timestamps, seasonal variable adjusted post-termination. A third page. An email chain from the replacement firm with a line that read, in unguarded candor, if we declare Parcel B a loss, we will finally get permission to reset on Victor's timeline. Conrad's gaze slid to the pages and away again. He did not reach for them. He chose disdain instead. Theatrics. The city inspector walked into the tent like an answer to the wrong word. He nodded to Aurora and did not wait to be introduced. I am here for my follow-up, he said. He turned to the screens. I will need the last 12 hours of logs. They were already queued. Dante flicked them onto the large display. The inspector watched the numbers paint their slow, careful picture. He noted the pump failure and the fix. He watched the storm cross the weather overlay and the staging adjust in response. Then he looked at Conrad. He did not look down. He did not look away. He said, this is corrective progress. Do not interrupt it with politics. Conrad's jaw flexed. For the briefest second, the air between him and the inspector turned brittle. Then it passed. He straightened and selected a new posture. Very well. We will reconvene at 5. He turned to go. At the flap, he stopped and looked back at Aurora. You have made an enemy you did not need to have. No, Harper said from her corner. She finally made a choice she needed to make. The tent exhaled when he left. It did not relax. The site had taught them not to confuse quiet with safety. Lila touched her earpiece and nodded to someone unseen. The north lane will handle 2 extra rigs if we lay matting. Procurement says they can get us the geogrid by noon. They will owe 3 favors for it. Spend the favors, Aurora said. We can pay them back with certainty later. The day thickened. The rain thinned. A patch of sun reached across Parcel D, like a blessing extended with caution. At noon, Lila's radio sparked with a voice that did not belong to a foreman or a courier. It belonged to a receptionist, breathless and apologetic. Someone left a package for Ms. Langford at the main office, she said. No return address. Security is holding it. It buzzed. Harper's head came up. Do not touch it, she said. She looked at Micah. Sabotage is rarely clever. It is usually clumsy and loud. Still, we are not going to assume anything. Aurora's stomach tightened. Not from fear of an explosion. From the old sense that people who cannot win in daylight often choose windows they think will not show their reflection. She nodded. Thank you. Engage the protocol. Move the staff to the lobby. Call the police. It was not a bomb. It was a small device built to jam wireless signals in an office, far from the site. It would have knocked out internal comms for an hour. It would have scrambled the cameras that fed the dashboard. It would have given a saboteur 1 hour of narrative with no moving pictures. Harper watched as security handed the device to the police and took notes without looking at her pad. She looked like someone filing an address in her permanent memory. The inspector stayed another 20 minutes. He signed his log with a small, neat hand. He shook one foreman's hand the way men do when respect arrives unannounced. Then he left with the same absence of theater he had arrived with. The crews returned to their movement. The pumps kept time. The sun showed its face again for 5 minutes that felt like 10. At 3, a new wave of visitors arrived at the north gate. Not board members, not rivals, neighbors. A cluster of residents with umbrellas and raincoats, and a woman with a stroller who looked like she had not planned to come to a construction site today and had decided anyway. The community liaison met them at the fence and spoke in the even voice of a person who knows that anger is sometimes grief by another name. Aurora watched them talk and felt something old shift in her chest, the slow grind of pride moving aside for a different posture. She walked to the fence with Micah and Lila. The liaison introduced names. Ms. Hopkins from the block near the creek, Mr. Arriaga from the row east of the laydown, Sister Joan from the church that would share a wall with Parcel C. The women and men asked questions, not polite ones, real ones. Where will the runoff go after the build? What happens when the next storm is not a forecast, but a surprise? How will the noise be managed while school is in session? Micah answered without jargon. He did not pretend to know the parts that were still in design. He did not sell what he could not deliver. When he did know, he showed them drawings and a small animation on his tablet that turned a plan into a path. He used words like corridor and canopy and retention, and then translated each into the language of everyday life. Trees here, water there, shade here, a bench where a person could sit when walking with a baby and needing a place to be still. Aurora spoke when he felt quiet. She said, I failed you when I chose a plan that made numbers look good and ignored the ground under your shoes. We are not doing that again. The first community jobs program postings will go up on Monday. Apprenticeships, survey assistants, safety watchers. If our build makes your lives harder, we will compensate you in money and in choices you help define. Sister Joan looked at her with eyes that had seen other leaders learn that sentence too late. We will hold you to that, she said. Then she smiled, not kindly, not unkindly, accurately. They left with pamphlets and QR codes in a different posture than the one they had walked in with. Not trust, not yet. Something like permission to be convinced. At 5, the board call began. The tile of faces felt like the last 2 days condensed into a single screen. The independent director sat forward. Another director wore the face of a person who has already chosen a side and is now rehearsing his speech for whatever party comes next. Conrad was a study in controlled impatience. Aurora started with the dashboard again. She brought the inspector on for 30 seconds. She brought the community liaison on for 30 more. She showed the corrective sequence and the cost curve that had begun to bend back towards sense. Then she stopped talking and let the site fill the silence with its small, steady noises. Somewhere, a pump thudded. Somewhere, a foreman's voice came through a radio. Somewhere, water that used to be a problem moved from where it should not be to where it should. Conrad broke the quiet. We cannot govern by live stream, he said. We govern by outcomes and by accountability. This CEO chose to humiliate a board advisor in public, to ignore best practice, and to put a multi-billion-dollar asset at risk. Aurora did not flinch. She did not look away. She did not explain her tone or her choice. She said plainly, the original firm was terminated for convenience and replaced with one that changed the data to justify a reset. The site is now stable, compliant, and on course. We will pour 3 test footings tomorrow. We will publish every cost adjustment. We will invite any director to walk the ground at any hour to witness the work. That is how we govern here. The independent director cleared his throat. I move that the board ratify the corrective plan, direct that Rivers and Cole be retained as independent environmental oversight, and authorize our legal counsel to investigate any manipulation that occurred after the termination of the original contract. A second director nodded. We second. Conrad's eyes thin-lined. He looked at the third director the way people look at coins when they need them to come up heads. The third director stared at the site feed instead. The motion carried. There were more words that followed, because boards like to fill the air with sentence fragments when they feel power shifting. There was a request for weekly updates. There was a polite ice bath of warnings, but the motion was in the record, and the door had moved on its hinges and the room felt different. After the call, Harper set her notebook down and breathed like a person who had carried a heavy box across a long room. She looked at Micah. He looked back. "You will keep your independence in writing," she said. "Not as a courtesy, as a clause. Victor will look for ways to return. Conrad will look for ways to call in favors. You need daylight written into the contract so bright no one can dim it without the neighborhood noticing the dark." "We will," Micah said. He turned to Aurora. "If you want us beyond Meridian East, we talk soon. Not today. Soon, before someone else tries to define what we are." She felt the truth of that like a bell. "Soon," she said. She meant it. Night arrived soft instead of hard. The crews rotated out with tired smiles. A taco truck that Lila had conjured from nowhere pulled up at the south gate, and men and women who had not eaten a real meal in a day stood under string lights and laughed like people who had been inside a storm and found the edge. The pumps kept time. The dashboard glowed like a hearth. Aurora and Micah stood near the east rim in a pocket of quiet that felt like a small room with no walls. She said, "Thank you. Not for saving my job. For saving the thing my job was supposed to be about." He shook his head. "You saved it. You chose the site over the story. That is the only choice that matters." She looked out at the mud that would be foundations and the water that would be courtyards and the shadows where children would play. In the distance, the city hummed an old song. She thought of the sentence that had begun this entire turn, the one she had spoken with heat she had not deserved to spill. "I have called someone better than you." She had meant it to wound. It had become the truth she was proud to speak. "What now?" she asked. And the question was not for the plan or the pumps. It was for the shape of a new relationship with her company, her work, the man beside her. "Now," he said, "we pour, we document, we breathe, and then we decide whether we build one project together or 100. They poured the first test footing at dawn. The concrete slid from the chute like a gray river, finding its channel. A small crowd gathered at a careful distance to watch something that looked ordinary and felt ceremonial. The inspector stood with his hands in his jacket pockets, not performing interest, simply showing it. The foreman gave a small nod. The crew moved in unison, boots and gloves and eyes trained on the line where material meets intent. Aurora stood near the command tent with a hard hat in the crook of her arm and coffee cooling in her palm. She watched the first smooth layer settle. The morning had the particular clarity that sometimes follows storms, as if the light itself had been scrubbed. She thought of the last week the way a person thinks of an illness that had lingered for months and finally begun to lift. Not with glee, with relief and patience for what remained. Micah came to stand beside her. He wore a jacket that had lost its battle with 2 nights of rain and a tie tucked into a pocket as if he had remembered to bring it and forgotten why. He looked at the footing like a painter studying a patch of Premier. "The first pour is not proof," he said carelessly. "It is permission to try again." She smiled. "You are a dangerous person to invite to celebrations." He shrugged. "I will bring cake at the end." Around them, the site moved forward. The second test footing followed, then the third. Lila's voice threaded the tent like a guideline. Dante's dashboard added bars and dates and small green lights that were not decoration, but discipline. Harper took 3 calls, wrote a letter, and sent a packet to the board's outside counsel that read, "When you boiled it down, tell the truth with us now or later, under oath." At noon, the neighborhood liaison returned with a laptop and a portable speaker. She had a small idea that landed like an anchor in all the right ways. A noon update for residents who could not come to the fence. 10 minutes. Live. Questions accepted. No spin. Aurora approved it without delay. Micah offered to join to answer the water questions. Lila framed the angle so people could see the work without being put to sleep by wide shots. The first stream was simple and imperfect and good. Sister Joan commented a single word in the chat. "Watching." At 2, a journalist called Lila and asked for a statement. He had been forwarded the termination letter in the seasonal variable memo by someone who did not love Conrad as much as Conrad loved himself. Lila did not play coy. She did not offer anonymous condemnation. She said on the record that Langford Nexus had reverted to the original model and was cooperating with the city to correct course. She said the company would publish its environmental logs daily for the duration of the heavy work. The journalist asked for a comment from Rivers and Cole. Micah offered a sentence that was not just a sentence, but a position. We prefer to be measured by what water does and where trees grow, rather than where our names appear in minutes. By 3, a message arrived from Victor. It came to Harper, not to Aurora. It read like someone trying to decide whether to fold or bluff with a weak hand. He offered a face-saving exit clause from his prior recommendations in exchange for a polite statement later. Harper sent him a 2-line reply that did not include the words no or yes. It included dates, facts, and a reminder that victory is a bad time to buy regret. Conrad did not write. He did not call. He did not appear. He sent a partner from his firm to the site with a junior counsel in tow. Harper met them at the gate and spoke with the partner for 4 minutes, while the junior counsel tried to look as if he understood what kind of room he had entered. The partner finally said, in a voice that wanted to sound magnanimous and could not quite suppress the gravel underneath, "You have your 7 days. Use them well." "We will," Harper said. She walked away before he could request any narrative favors. Late afternoon stepped into early evening without fuss. The taco truck returned and brought a second truck with hot chocolate, as if Lila had convinced the city that crew morale counted as infrastructure. The crews rotated again. The pumps kept their metronome cadence. The dashboard glowed. The site breathed. Aurora found Micah at a folding table in the tent drawing circles and arrows on a sheet of paper with a carpenter's pencil. The circles were parcels. The arrows were water and people. A small square off to one side was labeled in his careful hand, "The Grove." She leaned in. "The Grove," she said. "Not a park, not a courtyard." He looked up, found her, and then looked back at the square as if confirming it still belonged there. "When I was a kid," he said softly, "my mother took me to a stand of trees near our apartment complex. Not a big one. 4 old maples that never gave up. She said, 'When people make a place too hard to live in, trees refuse to leave first. That is how you know if a place can be saved.'" She studied the little square. The pull of it was immediate and practical. "What is it here?" "A cluster of trees that predate the industrial use of this lot," he said. "We thought they were gone. They are not gone. They are sleeping under the soil. If we regrade the rim and adjust the plaza approach, we can keep them and make them the anchor. Shade, water draw, a place to sit that asks for nothing but time. If we do it right, the neighborhood will treat the grove like a visitor that moved in and made the block braver." A memory rose in her, uninvited and welcome. Her grandfather planting a cherry sapling behind a rental house and telling her that not everything you plant will live, but everything you plant teaches you how to try again. She nodded. "Do it," she said. "Make room. We will cut other ribbon elements to pay for it." He smiled, not with pride, with relief. He drew the square darker. He added a line that became a path. At 7, she met with Harper in a temporary office trailer. The legal counsel had spread documents across a narrow table. The evidence trail she had assembled was simple. It showed the termination for convenience with no cause cited. It showed the replacement firm adjusting the model without peer review. It showed an email from a back-channel account in Victor's organization asking a junior analyst to reframe a chart for optics. It showed nothing illegal in the obvious sense and everything unacceptable in the moral sense. It was enough to pull a thread that would unravel a career in due time. "We will proceed in stages," Harper said. "We will not feed the press anything we have not already filed. We will not play public revenge. We will play public repair. When the city is satisfied with the site, we will present this to the board and recommend they commission an independent review of both the termination and the proposed reset. We will prepare to defend your decisions in the only court that matters for a company that wants to endure, the one where the neighbors and the market refuse to forget." Aurora listened and felt the old reflex to rush justice lean forward. Then she pushed it back. "No, we will not stage a bonfire. We will build a light. Let Conrad walk into it whenever he chooses." Harper's eyes warmed. "Discipline looks good on you." "It hurts," Aurora said quietly. "It stops hurting and becomes a habit," Harper said. Ask Lila. Ask Micah. At 9, the site fell into the night shift rhythm. The sounds changed timbre, fewer voices, more machines. The weather held steady. The sky cleared enough to show a slice of moon. A crane turned its head with the slow dignity of a large animal surveying its sleep. Micah walked the perimeter one more time, boots leaving a familiar sequence of prints as if the ground had begun to recognize his weight. At the east rim, Aurora caught up with him. She had changed into dry boots. Her hair was braided back in a manner that suggested both work and a concession to win. She stood with him in the half-light and did not speak for a while. The silence had become a language they shared. When she did speak, it was without preamble. "Do not leave after Meridian," she said. "Do not vanish into the next contract and send me charts from a distance. I have spent 2 years building a company that lost its sense of why. In the last week, I found it again, and I did not find it alone." He held her gaze. "Rivers and coal must stay independent," he said. "Non-negotiable. The day I work for you is the day you will stop receiving the only thing I know how to sell. The truth that is inconvenient at first and saves time later. I do not want to buy you," she said. "I want to build with you. A partnership. Clear terms. Daylight written into the contract, the way Harper said. Fill the blanks you name. Tell me the price that protects your mission and mine." He thought for a long beat, the way people do when they are not calculating money but meaning. Then he nodded once. "We will draft it with 4 clauses that matter. Independence, access, transparency, exit. We will publish it, and we will allow any neighborhood group to request a copy the same day the board signs." She almost laughed at the audacity of paperwork written for an audience beyond the room that approves it. "Almost. Good. Do it." He took out his phone and typed a single line to Dante. "Draft the 4-clause frame. Send to Harper. Title it The Daylight Addendum." Dante replied with a single checkmark. They stood a moment longer. The pumps kept time. The city hummed its old song. A gust moved through the fence and tugged at their jackets like a friend. Then Lila called with a small crisis that did not feel enormous after the week they had survived. They split to solve it, and both solutions were ordinary and exactly the kind of work that keeps foundations from cracking. The next morning, the inspector arrived with a new person in tow, a young engineer with a notebook and a face full of interest. The older man gestured toward the work and then stepped back and let the younger one ask the questions. Micah answered with patience and a small glint of something that looked a lot like a teacher discovering a student who would be fine after this without him. By noon, the board had received the Daylight Addendum. Harper shepherded it through 2 predictable objections and 1 unpredictable ally. The independent director called it elegant in its simplicity and asked whether he could show it to another board considering a similar posture on a different project. Aurora said yes. Harper sent the document to legal to be stamped and returned. Lila put a copy on the site portal under a tab titled How We Will Stay Honest. At 3, the journalist from the day before published a story. It did not soften the mess. It did not sensationalize the repair. It quoted the inspector. It quoted the community liaison. It quoted Micah. It quoted the addendum. It quoted Aurora. It ended with a line that read like a verdict offered rather than imposed. The company learned to listen to the ground again. We will see if it knows how to keep listening when the ground is quiet. At 5, the crews gathered under a tarp for a short meeting. Not a speech, an update. The foreman spoke. The liaison spoke. The inspector, who had returned for a full walk in the afternoon, offered one sentence that made a dozen tired faces lift. "I have seen worse projects pretend they were better and collapse. I have rarely seen a project admit it was wrong and then get to work. Keep going." Then, because people need ceremony even when they pretend they do not, Aurora lifted a small sapling out of a bucket of water at the edge of Parcel C and held it up. Not for show, for planting. A child from the block, the baby from the stroller yesterday now in a sling on a father's chest, reached a small hand toward a leaf. A crew member grinned and dug a hole with a spade he had probably used for less gentle tasks. They planted the sapling in damp soil that would soon be the grove, and the wind moved through the leaves with a sound that was not applause and sounded better. That night, when the site settled into its steady breath, Aurora went back up to the glass office that had been a cage and now felt like a lookout. The rain had finally given up, and the city lights had taken back the sky. She stood with a cup of tea that had stopped steaming and watched the dashboard pulse as if it were a living thing, and in a way it was. Her phone buzzed. A message from Conrad. It was brief. "We should talk." She considered not replying. Then she sent a sentence that was not a taunt and not an invitation. "We can meet with council present after the city signs off. If you wish to resign your position, send your letter to the board chair." No reply came. That was an answer, too. She put the phone down and let her reflection in the glass come into focus. She saw the woman who had armored herself so thoroughly that she mistook quiet for small. She saw the leader who had relearned what listening felt like when it hurt. She saw the partner she could be to people who did not need credit to do good work. A soft knock sounded at her door. She turned. Micah stepped in with 2 paper cups and the same small paper bag as the night before. He did not ask if he could come in. He did not assume. He stood with the door half open and waited for her to choose. She nodded and he entered. He handed her a cup. He set the bag on the desk. "Strategic," he said again. The word had become a private joke in a shorthand for care. She sipped and winced. Cold. He smiled. Then he pulled 2 small metal spoons from his pocket. He held one up like a magician, delivering the punchline to a trick, and then used it as if it had been made for stirring reality into place. "We should write the press note about the addendum before someone else describes it for us," he said. Short, clear, without the words innovation or synergy. She laughed. The sound startled her, and then it settled. "Agreed. Also, we need a plan for after Meridian East." He tilted his head. "Growth or depth?" "Both," she said. "We will not be everywhere and nowhere. We will be in the places where trees refuse to leave first." He nodded. Then he took out his phone and sent Dante a line that read like the beginning of a different chapter. "Build a map of cities with sleeping groves." She looked back at the night. The pumps kept time. The dashboard pulsed. The lights of the city blinked like a constellation she finally knew how to read. She thought of the first sentence that had detonated across the glass office, and how it had been a weapon and then a guide. "I have called someone better than you." It echoed now with a different weight. She had called him useless. He had answered with work. She had called him in. He had answered with truth. Better was not a contest. It was a choice you made every hour in how you showed up for the ground under your feet and the people beside you. Down at the site, a crew member straightened, put a hand on his lower back, and then smiled at something the foreman said. In the neighborhood, a child pointed at the new sapling and gave it a name too soft for microphones to catch. In the legal office on the 3rd floor, Harper closed a folder with the quiet satisfaction of a person who knew exactly how much fight she had left. In a tiny apartment 3 blocks away, the community liaison washed her hands, wiped her eyes, and sat down to write the notes for tomorrow's noon stream. In a co-working loft across town, Dante pulled up a map of the country and began to search for little dots of old trees. Micah set his cup down. He looked at Aurora. Not as a subordinate, not as a savior, as a partner who understood that tomorrow would need as much humility as today required nerve. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she said. They walked back to the new war room together. No music, no grand declarations. Just 2 people crossing a floor to continue a conversation with a site that had finally decided to forgive them for pretending it was simple. The pumps kept time. The night waited without impatience. And beneath a temporary tarp that smelled like rain and dust and hope, a little grove slept in its new soil, roots already tasting which direction to go.